Good afternoon. Thank you for being here at our biweekly press conference. Another opportunity for us to give updates to you, the community, and be able to answer some of your questions. So we'll start off going through some of our numbers year to date compared to the numbers last year. So our homicides have gone down from 23 this time year to date to 16. Non-fatal shootings, which we'll talk a bit more in depth later about non-fatal shootings, have gone down from 59 year to date to 35. And then our robberies and carjackings have gone down from 23 to 13 year to date. So you can see pretty good improvements there, and we hope to continue on that trend. One of the things I do want to talk a bit more in depth about is our traffic fatalities. Our traffic fatalities are down, but we have had a few pedestrians hit recently and some hit and runs. And what I'll point out is that when it comes to traffic incidents, one of the things that nobody likes traffic enforcement, particularly. Nobody wants to get pulled over for speeding. But when you look, there is a correlation between police officers writing speeding tickets and traffic reductions in traffic deaths and serious injury accidents. And so we need officers out there on the interstates and our major thoroughfares making sure that they're doing that type of enforcement work. And one of the other things is that when we think about the technology that we're employing out there, like our flock cameras, that's very important pieces of technology to be able to capture and apprehend people that might be involved in things like hit and run accidents, as well as some of our more violent crimes. And then the other thing is pedestrian safety. I think it seems like every couple of years, every so often, we really have to come back and focus on pedestrian safety on some of our major thoroughfares. So when you look at the last two serious hit and run accidents involving pedestrians, one on Broadway, one on Dixie, those are areas that historically we have gotten fatal pedestrian accidents, and it is very important, particularly at night, for pedestrians to be aware of their surroundings. Cross at crosswalks, cross when you have the light. Don't wear dark clothing in the middle of the night and cross in places where visibility is low, where there's not good lighting. So please understand that. Shifting gears a little bit back to the violent crime. I think your station last week pointed out, or our last update pointed out, the reduction in shootings and violent crime in general, but also noted that what happens when we get a spike in violent crime, and then ultimately we ended up with 3 people shot at the DMV, I believe it was later that day or the next day. And the thing is that what I'm asking officers to go out and do, when you put it in the context of our crime plan is a 3-front plan. We have short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals with our crime plan. And when you look at the long-term things of neighborhood improvement and conducting long-term investigations, I think we're doing a pretty good job of starting off with that. Our long-term investigations, as you've seen, and I'll show you in just a minute some of our indictment numbers, federal indictments, those long-term cases, these detectives are doing an absolutely outstanding job. What Assistant Chief Corey Robinson and many of the other managers and directors for other city agencies are doing as far as targeting those SFI areas, those sustained focus improvement areas for those quality of life issues, to be able to turn over neighborhoods and change those for the better. I think we're off to a really good start just a few months into the deployment of our plan. When you look at that midterm type of thing on our crime plan, what you're talking about is targeting people with violent crime warrants who have already committed crime and getting them off the street. We're doing an outstanding job when people have warrants of locating them, finding them, and arresting them. Both our fugitive unit, our criminal interdiction division, as well as many of our impact units within the divisions are doing a great job of finding people who are already wanted. The other aspect of that is our group violence intervention. And one of the things that we've noted before is that several months back, we transitioned our group violence intervention coordinator, Detective Haygood, out of community engagement and put him over into CID so that we could better share that information on the enforcement side. And this has already paid dividends to have that amount of intelligence worked over into CID. But as an agency, we have to uphold our end of what group violence is. So when we talk about group violence intervention, We are talking about a program that targets people who we know are likely to be involved in or be victims of group violence. And we try to get them out of that lifestyle by providing alternative resources to them. That being said, the other side of this is that we put them on notice. We warn them that we are coming after you. And LMPD, frankly, needs to do a better job of going after these people before they commit more violent crimes or become victims of violent crimes. And so with that being said, I've really tasked CID and our impact units with targeting these individuals who we know are part of this group violence and get them before they commit those heinous acts. So you are going to see officers out there being very present, very visible, very proactive. If somebody's involved in a group or around violent crime, they should not feel comfortable moving throughout our city. They should know that they need to look over their shoulder every step of the way, that the police might be stopping them, because we have to also talk about disruption of crime, not just enforcement and apprehension after people have already committed crimes, but how are we going to disrupt that crime cycle before it hits and before it does such great damage in our community. And so I'm asking those detectives and those officers to go out there and do that hard work, that work that we know is dangerous, but that work that we know has to be done in order to continue to bring those violent crime numbers down. So you can expect to see that increase over the next several weeks and all the way through the summer, that we are going to have a much more visible presence of proactive policing, and I'm expecting those officers to do that and supporting them on that mission. When you look at our arrest data from homicide non-fatal, so we've cleared four homicide cases so far this year, and we've made 13 non-fatal shooting arrests. A couple of those are arrests from cases last year, which Lieutenant Shadoan will speak about. And we've had 30 federal indictments so far. And remember, those federal indictments are important from the standpoint of those take time, and there are real long-term consequences for people who get federally indicted, and they are going to serve significant amounts of time in jail. So very proud of that number and the work that those officers have done. I'll ask for a little bit of help here. So on February 28th, so last Friday around 7:30, this person stole a St. Matthew's EMS ambulance wagon from Jewish Hospital downtown in the ambulance bay. Shortly after that was reported, officers located that ambulance just a couple of blocks away. It had a little bit of damage from where the person had wrecked it, but the person had fled. And so we need the community's help, particularly pay attention to this backpack that seems pretty unique. But we need help identifying this suspect who stole this ambulance. That's obviously a crime that we are not going to tolerate. And again, we ask for the community's help in that. First Division detectives will be taking all of the leads and taking lead on this investigation. So make use of the anonymous tip line, 574 LMPD. At this point, I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Drew Fox of our Firearms Intelligence Unit. And he's going to give you a little bit of background on some of the cases that we do with prohibited possessors, and then he'll turn it over to Lieutenant Matt Shadoan of the Non-Fatal Shooting Squad. You've met Major Steve Lacefield, who is now the major over criminal interdiction, but he preceded Lieutenant Shadoan in non-fatal shooting and standing up that unit, and we're very proud of the work they do. So I'll give them both an opportunity to speak about the work that they are doing in their units. Lieutenant Fox.
Good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant Fox, commander within the Criminal Interdiction Division. Over the Focused Intelligence Unit, we house the Gang Investigation Squad, the Firearm Intelligence Squad, the GBI Group, and the now a year out Prohibited Firearm Possessor Project. So speaking on what the Chief was speaking on earlier, the focused intel, the focused investigations, the very targeted investigations, that's what this Prohibited Firearm Possessor Project is all about. So this project aims to go out and supplement patrol-related investigations dealing with those who are prohibited from possessing a firearm. Now, at the Commonwealth level, usually it's going to be somebody who's a convicted felon is who we're looking at. There's also individuals who would be considered prohibited for either an EPO or a DVO or things of that nature. We also follow the federal firearm prohibitors as well. We've got folks on this project with the ATF, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the County Attorney's Office. So just a little bit about what this looks like. We run an arrest and screener report daily. We look at post-arrest narratives predominantly from patrol investigations. The qualifier being there has to be a firearm that was seized during the arrest. So once we have that, we look through, screen these cases, both LMPD and the ATF, determine whether or not an individual is prohibited. We come to find that roughly about a third of the arrests that we looked at, you can see our numbers down here on the bottom of this screen, a little over 1,000 last year for 2024, and about a third of those last year were convicted felons. From that number, we look to triage our resources and try and identify the individuals who we believe are most likely or most actively involved in driving violent crime. So just like the chief had said, that's what this project drives into. We get somebody with a gun before they're going to use it, or maybe after they've already used it, but we don't necessarily have enough to prove that case in court. This individual hadn't been arrested yet. So there's a lot of intelligence that goes in to that. That screening report is then summarized and it's passed off to the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Commonwealth Attorney's Office at the same time. Past iterations of this project, there's a driving force of how many cases can we drive towards the federal side or towards the Commonwealth side. This team meets monthly, and what this looks like is not where can we put all these cases, it's where can we get the most years served. We're talking about very violent individuals that we're looking at driving resources towards as far as investigations and cases. So where can we get the most time for these individuals and send them away to prison off the streets? And the last piece of this is our feedback loop, looking for effectiveness and the efficiency of the overall project. So this has got kind of a twofold part. We get feedback from the patrol officers as well as the prosecutors of what's worked, and then we also push down to patrol officers over what we're seeing and how we can do a better job going forward into these firearm-related cases. Year to date, the last thing I've got down there on the bottom, it's a little difficult to see. We've got just over 100 firearm-related arrests for 2025 year to date that we've reviewed. All right, and next up, you've got Lieutenant Shadone with the non-fatal shooting unit.
Good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant Matthew Shadone. I'm the commander of the non-fatal shooting unit. As Chief mentioned earlier, now Major Lacefield did a great job setting up that unit about nearly 2 years ago, and they've been performing really well since then. I just wanted to start off with a bit of an overview of the unit and what it is that we do exactly. Personnel-wise, we are comprised of 16 detectives and 3 sergeants. We also have an intelligence analyst from our strategic criminal intelligence unit that is embedded in our office and helping with tasks on an everyday basis. The purpose of the unit from the beginning was to dedicate specific resources to these violent crimes, to our non-fatal shootings. We understand how those tie into homicides and how victims and suspects from our cases can sometimes become victims and suspects from homicide cases. So we work in conjunction with the homicide unit, and we mirror our cases, our investigations after their models. In doing that, we are able to give these cases the care and the attention that they need and that they deserve, and to provide the victims the closure and justice that they deserve. You know, when we look at these incidents, as you would a homicide, you know, we understand that these incidents have lifetime consequences for everyone involved, from the victims, the perpetrators, and even the witnesses who observe these crimes and the trauma that comes along with that. So we take our investigations very seriously and investigate all leads to our case's conclusion. Wanted to move into how we operate a little bit. We operate on what's called the crime gun intelligence model. This is an interagency collaboration. It's focused on the timely collection, management, and analysis of crime gun evidence. We get a lot of our evidence from scenes where we recover bullet fragments or casings and that kind of thing. We take the information that we have from the scenes and other evidence that we develop during the investigation to identify our shooters and start to disrupt that criminal activity and hopefully put a stop to that cycle of violence that we've seen. In doing that, what our ultimate goal is to prevent the future violence, to find these offenders, work with the other units that we collaborate with, to develop the intelligence that's going to help us put a stop to that cycle of violence. So that crime gun intelligence model, like I mentioned, we use a lot of different resources. NIBIN, which is the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. So that is what we use to analyze the evidence that we receive from not only the scenes that we were working at the time, but scenes from historic shootings or homicides, where we can correlate previous events to current investigations. We use ATF's E-Trace system, which helps us to identify the history of weapons, where they were purchased, how long ago, who the previous purchasers are. We use human intelligence and every additional resources that we have available. Like I mentioned, we work in conjunction with the homicide unit, with criminal interdiction, with the strategic criminal intelligence unit, and the real-time crime center, as well as the crime scene unit. These units are involved in our everyday operations. We share, like I said, the intelligence with these units throughout the department to help us develop leads in our cases, make strong connections, and we collaborate with them on a weekly basis. We have an intelligence sharing meeting. We involve various other community stakeholders from the Office of the Commonwealth Attorney, from the County Attorney, from Group Violence Intervention, as was mentioned earlier, from the patrol divisions, who have a little more on-the-ground, everyday view of incidents that could be related to our shootings and homicide shootings. We also involve our federal partners from ATF, FBI, DEA, and the Marshal's Office. And we found this collaborative approach has been very successful in building cases of exceptional quality for successful prosecution of these cases. As we talked about earlier, the statistics for year-to-date 2025, we had a total of 35 non-fatal shootings. Compared to 2024, we are down about 40% from that number. So that's a good statistic for sure. I think we can attribute some of that to the quality of our investigations, the simple but consistent police work that we do. We knock on doors, we share intelligence, we build good relationships with the other units that we collaborate with, and ultimately we rely on the community for assistance. When we knock on doors and people are willing to talk to us and tell us things that they saw or share video that they might have with us, that is incredibly helpful in solving these cases. So to talk a little bit more about our investigations, I mentioned earlier that we had 35 total shootings. Cases that the non-fatal shooting unit took or investigated this year are 31. So there will be a few of those that fall outside of the purview of the non-fatal shooting unit. That those might be domestic violence cases or other cases that don't fall within our purview. We had one incident with 2 victims for a total of 32 victims in our 31 incidents. As Chief mentioned earlier, we made 3 arrests in 2024. Or 3 arrests in 2025 in relation to investigations that started in 2024, and another 10 in relation to investigations from 2025. The trends that we've seen since the inception of this unit, it's been a very steady decline. And again, like I said, we attribute that to the help of the community and the consistent police work that we've done to work these cases. As far as trends go in the community, the things that we have seen, that we have concern about, we've seen multiple road rage incident cases. Those are some of the most dangerous and the most senseless cases that we see. Those are people losing their cool and making poor decisions in difficult circumstances. And a lot of times we see people that are not taking into account the additional dangers that go into those added elements. You've got moving vehicles and other traffic and lots of innocent bystanders, child victims that have become victims of road rage shootings. And that's something that as a community is absolutely unacceptable. Another one of the trends that we've seen is not necessarily one of the most prevalent, but it's certainly one of the most concerning. We've seen more young perpetrators of violent crime, perpetrators of these shootings, and victims of violent crime. And those are certainly the ones that we focus particular attention on and want to make sure that we have good resolutions at the end of those cases. Again, looking at our trends from year to date, it has been pretty cold. It's been snowy. People have been sick. So typically what that'll do is keep people inside. So we have seen that downward trend for 2025 in our numbers, which we could expect that to go up as the weather warms up a little bit and people start coming outside a little bit more. We'll see more of those conflicts in the community and people making the decision to engage in that violent crime. Moving on, I'll mention again the 574 LMPD anonymous tip line. Any tips that come in that are related to non-fatal shootings are going to come directly to our unit. We're going to investigate those to their thorough conclusion. That's going to allow the tipster to remain anonymous, so you can feel comfortable putting that information out there, and we will investigate it and protect your identity. There are a number of different ways you can submit tips, either by calling 574 LMPD. We have an online tip submission form, and there is also the P3 Tips app for the iPhone and Android. You can find some of this information on our gun violence dashboard on the LMPD transparency tab of the Louisville-police.org website. There's a lot of other resources in there, information available so the members of the public can see what's going on and understand some of the gun violence that's going on in our community. With that, I'll turn it back over to the chief. Thank you all.
And thank you, Lieutenant Shadowin and Lieutenant Fox. Again, he talked about all of these tools and things that they use to investigate these crimes, but there is nothing more important than community involvement in keeping our streets safe. And so we constantly ask the community to stay involved and participate in the criminal justice process, so that not only we can catch people who have committed acts of violence and bring them to justice and seek that justice for those families, but to prevent the next shooting. We know that there are cycles of violence, that one shooting often leads to another. And so anytime we can disrupt that cycle, that is definitely our goal. And so, like I said, you're going to see officers out here targeting these groups and these individuals to make sure that we get them off the street before they commit that next serious act of violence. I just want to turn over to some of our upcoming community events that we have going on. Obviously, this week we'll have this weekend the St. Patrick's Day Parade. It's a big deal in the Highlands, so you'll have that going through the Highlands on Saturday. Our Citizens Police Academy will graduate 21 new students through the Citizens Police Academy. That's a 10-week course where community members learn about the operations of the police department, the criminal justice system. And I'd like to give a shout out to Minerva Varola, who runs that program and does an absolutely amazing job with it. We'll also be teaming up with Metro Housing Authority to provide about 100 or so beds to elderly folks living in Housing Authority properties. And Elizabeth Strojan and her team are doing an outstanding job of working to straighten up those properties and give a high quality of life to people that live in those properties. And then lastly, I'll touch on our awards banquet coming up, where we get to honor the great work that the men and women of LMPD do, both sworn and civilian staff, and recognize those people for what they've done in the past year or so in 2024, and give some recognition and honor to those folks that are out there, working their tails off every day, trying to make sure that they keep this community safe and bring justice to victims and represent our agency in the way that we want them to. So very appreciative to them. And at this time, I will open it up to questions.
Do you guys have any more information, any more leads? Obviously, the Metro Corrections passing of him, I know the big one's coming up. Any more updates on that? Still.
So the question is, are there any more updates on the death of Corrections Officer Weta outside of his upcoming funeral arrangements? I believe the arrangements are for March 15th, I believe. But I do know from talking to our homicide commander, Lieutenant Les Skaggs, that they feel like they have some pretty good leads on that case. Right now, there's nothing new to put out as far as asking for additional information, but I feel confident that they're on the right track with where they're going with that investigation, and hopefully we'll be able to bring some news of closure for his family and the community on that incident.
Can you talk a little bit more about the road rage? I know we had one not long ago. Talk a little bit more on that, how it's possibly increasing. Why do you think that is?
I don't know if it's actually an increase as much as it's a trend that we've seen pop up. And just like pedestrian deaths and incidents, we see these things come up and flare up every now and again. But I think we've all been in that situation where somebody cuts us off and all of a sudden you're mad and it's ruining your day. I think we could all benefit from just taking a deep breath every now and again. Road rage is one of these psychological events that I don't really understand, because we might be the nicest people in the world when we put us behind the wheel of a car and we turn into the biggest jerks you've ever met in your life. And I think we all suffer from that at different points. Just take a chill pill, relax a little bit. You're going to get there. Like, it is not a personal offense if somebody cuts you off. They don't know you. They don't care about you. They're going to go on about their day. You go on about yours too. There is no reason for the offense of somebody cutting you off or honking at you in traffic to turn into a life and death situation. But rest assured that if you take it to the next level, LMPD is going to make sure that we do our part to investigate that incident and take care of that. So
it's been about a year since the PFP program has been at work. Can you go through either an example or maybe a success story of how it's
I'll bring Lieutenant Fox back up for that question. So the question was an example of how the PFP project has been successful over the past year.
So being a year out, we still have several cases that are active in the court system, and so we're waiting to get better data as far as how that delineates down. Some of the early cases on some of the best case examples I've got when we're looking at some of these cases, it's going to be individuals that qualify as a persistent felony offender or an armed career criminal. So we're looking at a minimum sentence of 10 years. And these are individuals who have records from robbery in the first degree, doing a carjacking, getting out, and being out for maybe 6-7 months and then get picked up with a gun, all the way to folks who have murder cases that are years and years past, but they get out of prison, they show the trend of constantly being armed and also consistently being involved in criminal activity. So that's probably the best. That's probably not exactly what you're looking for, but the best that I've got at this time.
Do you have any examples that, like, maybe our community will remember or resonate with to kind of explain how this works?
One of the best examples that I can think of, there was an individual who, through some issues to no fault of anybody within the judicial system, I want to make that clear, that I'm not throwing stones at anybody within the judicial system, but just the way the current criminal code was interpreted. This individual had aged out after having been convicted as an adult and had aged out on a rape sentence and was released after a very short period of time. And that's probably the most resonating point that I can think. And this guy was picked up with a gun, and through this project, it was able to go back, look at his history, and because of some of the instances, and because of some of the great work of, this is not me doing this work. This is great work of detectives and patrol officers that were able to put all this together and dig through his criminal history and paint this picture that he's now looking at a 20-plus year sentence going back into federal custody just for having a gun and qualifying as someone who's an armed career criminal is what that statute reads.
And this number 101 firearm-related arrests this year, is that through the work of PFP, or is that just sort of general what LMPD is saying?
So that is 101 this year that have been reviewed. So that's not the total number of arrests, firearm-related arrests that LMPD's made, but that's the total number that have been reviewed by the project right now. And the chief has devoted some additional resources to that we're going to be able to review. Similar, we're expecting to review the same that we reviewed last year. By the end of 2024, we had approximately 125 active cases, and so that's what we're looking at that we'll probably maintain is somewhere around that 100 active cases going through the court process. And again, we've only had a handful that have adjudicated now, so I would imagine in another 6 to 12 month period, we will see much of the work from 2024 start to pull out as far as the post conviction information that we've got.
My question is probably for Lieutenant Shadowin. So the advisory mentioned that we would get an update on an investigation that garnered a lot of attention. Which shooting was that? Do you know?
I'm sorry. One
We
more
got
time.
the media advisory today. It said that you all would give us an update on an investigation by the non-fatal shooting unit that garnered a lot of attention.
Okay, that may be something I can.
I'll take care of that. Okay. Okay, well, then my next question will be for the chief. So you all mentioned trends that came out of your investigations with the non-fatal shooting unit. Do you know of any trends based on your investigations that you are seeing with hit and runs? Like when the vehicles do run, is it because it's stolen? Do people run out of fear? Like based on your expertise, why does that happen?
So the question was about the trends and hit and runs and why those happen. People run for various reasons. Sometimes it's scared. Sometimes it's because they are involved in other types of criminal activity. So we have seen that in stolen cars. We have seen that in people who might be armed or have drugs or warrants, things like that. And we also see it on occasion where it's a person who hits and kills somebody and gets scared and flees. So there are various reasons why an individual might, but that is particularly in those cases, that's where the technology comes into play so much. I don't know if you recall, but around last 4th of July, we had a young lady that was hit and killed at 16th and Jefferson in a hit and run. And those traffic officers investigated that and ultimately ended up, I think they got that car out of Indiana, were able to track that car and make an arrest in that case. And that was largely because of the combination of talking to witnesses and the technology that was able to be utilized to find and identify that vehicle and that driver. So, yes.
Is there a way for the public to see which cases the PFP decides to take up?
You want to talk about the criteria for selection of cases that go through PFP?
And is there a way for the public to see like the specific cases that it decides to review?
Would you repeat your question one more time?
Yeah, I'm curious if there's a way for the public to see which specific cases that the PFP project decides to review and compile reports on.
So the question, is there a way for the public to be able to see which cases the PFP project looks at? Broadly spoken, we look at every firearm arrest that comes through LMPD. From that, we rely a lot on criminal history. There's some other investigative information, and again, to what the chief had brought up earlier, with GVI now being under the Criminal Interdiction Division and housed under Focused Intelligence, we work with the GVI folks. We also work with all the division level impact folks as well as the detectives to try and make a determination that's not just a feeling, but it's actually based on intelligence, right? Like we're looking at investigative tools and resources to be able to point and say, this is why we feel that this particular case we're gonna focus in on with the limited number of resources that we have.
Anything else?
Chief Humphrey, I have a question for you. This is from a colleague or a coworker. Next Thursday, March 13th, is 5 years since Breonna Taylor was killed. Can you talk about the lessons learned and what this department has changed since then?
Well, I think the question was 5 years on from the death of Breonna Taylor and everything that happened post that incident. I think if you look at the functioning, the makeup, the culture of this department, we are not the same place as we were 5 years ago. And I would expect that 5 years from now, we will continue to grow and improve from this point forward. I mean, it's been well documented. I'm the 6th chief since then, just 5 years ago. We've had massive turnover. We've had hundreds of policies changed. We've instituted all different types of systems and checks and balances. And frankly, we are still striving towards becoming a department of constant improvement, where it does not take a similar event for us to learn lessons to improve. That is how we operate on a day-to-day basis, and that's the challenge to myself, and that's the challenge that I put forth to every officer on this department, is that we make sure that our successes are intentional, and we make sure that when we have places where we need to improve, that we have systems in place to challenge that and find ways to make sure that we do those things better the next time. And so I would think that I know that anniversary is often a time of pain for many, but it's also a time of reflection and recognizing where we were versus where we are.
My final follow-up question, do you have a message for her family 5 years later?
Well, there's nothing that I can say that's going to, bring their daughter back. That incident was an absolute tragedy, and LMPD failed on that. And for that, we are very sorry that our failures contributed to their pain. And it is our dedication every day that we do our job the best we can to make sure that the community is kept safe.
Anything else, guys?
Chief, a question for you pertaining to the Deputy Shirley case. I know it was last month that said the assistant Commonwealth Attorney dropped the case without prejudice because there was evidence missing. To your knowledge, is there any open or closed internal investigation pertaining who might have been involved in that particular case?
No, that investigation remains open, and we are exploring other resources to be able to help us with that. It's a complicated case. Many homicides are difficult to solve, and so I don't see this as being the fault of any individual. It's a difficult case with difficult evidence to find that happened in the middle of the night, and again another tragic violent crime that happened. And so we are working with some other resources now to try to fill those gaps, and hopefully we can bring justice to the family of Deputy Shirley as well. So, thank you all.